I'm really grateful to you for writing this book because I feel personally you've helped me out with a few problems that I've been chewing on for the last very long time. You've written many books, 22 of which some you say are not in print any longer, and you're glad that they're not.
Yes, we have to start somewhere, when I began, I was really very skeptical about religion. I never intended to be a writer about religion at all. When I left my convent, I thought I'd finished with religion, that was it. And for 13 years, I wanted nothing to do with it whatsoever. And when I saw people on the tube or the train reading a religious book, I'd feel quite ill, you know, and never thought that I'd be one day writing these things too. I wanted to be a university professor, and there were a series of absolute career disasters, and I finally ended up in television, because of my religious background, making highly skeptical, provocative programs about faith. There was a definite Dawkins-esque kind of tinge to my early work. And so that's why I'm happy. I didn't know enough, really. I didn't have enough knowledge, and I was still very angry about life, I think, and God in particular. So I just am glad that they are out of circulation. They're now, however, extremely expensive to buy on the internet. They've become kind of collector's items.
Karen, what was the turning point, or the evolution in your thinking?
Well, it happened after another career disaster when my television career folded. And I decided it was dreadful because I'd really relied on television to keep me in food and shelter. I wasn't paid much, but it was something. Without this, and it was all very ignominious at the end, I was left high and dry, stranded. I didn't have anybody around me to egg me on any longer to be outrageous. I was alone, silent, in a house, you know, in a very sort of isolated part of London, because that was all I could afford, and living in silence because I was alone all day, and I live alone, gradually the text started taking on new meaning. Silence is very important in my book, if you remember, and you cannot read a poem at a party. You need a certain amount of quiet and a certain amount of receptivity to understand, to really read a poem. And I'd intended my book, A History of God, to take the skeptical line of its predecessors. I thought, you know, I'd just show in my usual aggressive way how people simply rejigged God, you know, whenever it suited them. But gradually, in quietness, as I say, without anyone around to exclaim to about the absurdity of some of these doctrines, the text started to take on new meaning. Theology is poetry. It should be poetry. It is an attempt to express the inexpressible. And so gradually, I started to see things in a different light. And there was one very important quotation I found in a footnote in a very big magisterial book called The Venture of Islam. And in this footnote, it warned the historian of religion not to approach the spiritualities and mysticisms of the past in a spirit of superior post-Enlightenment rationality. You have, he said, to cultivate what he called the science of compassion. Science, not in the sense of physics and chemistry, but in the sense of knowledge. A knowledge that you gain by compassion, the ability, which it doesn't mean to feel sorry for people, but to feel with the other. And so I thought that's absolutely right. And he was saying that you must, when you're dealing with, say, medieval spiritualities, you must, in a scholarly way, recreate the circumstances in which this spirituality arose. And all the time asking yourself, why? And not leave it until you could imagine yourself in similar circumstances feeling and doing the same. Then you can write about it. But don't write about them in a sort of superior way, say, well, of course, this is undeveloped rubbish. And I found that this was also changing me, because it meant that I had to leave clever, skeptical Karen on the back burner. And when I was writing about, say, the Prophet Muhammad, I had to enter into the mind of a man living in the absolute hell of 7th century Arabia, who sincerely believed that he'd been touched by God. And if I didn't enter into that, I would miss the essence of Muhammad. And compassion, I now know, is also essential to the religious life. It is through compassion, putting yourself aside and entering into the life of the other. That it is that, all the world religions say, that bring you into the presence of what's called God, Nirvana, Brahman, or Tao. And so I found that too was giving me, so I'd be at my desk and I would have moments where I would feel deeply touched within and lifted momentarily beyond myself, just in a millisecond, a sort of wonder. And so it all changed. My relationship to the subject changed, and History of God became a kind of quest for me. And most of my later books, too, have been part of that continued quest.